Good morning, everyone. It's Kathleen, and how are you today? I hope you're well. I hope you've had a great weekend, and welcome to Level Up Your English with that Kathleen Louise. So, before we get started, don't forget to introduce yourself in the chat. If you feel like sharing where you're calling from or where you're joining from and what your native language is, that's awesome. That helps us to um, get an idea of what issues you might be dealing with or um, things like that. So, again, if I know what your native language is, I can either I'm familiar with it through learning it myself, or I can then look it up and study what issues you might have when you go to speak English. So that's super helpful to me. And it just lets everybody else know where we're all from and what a big world it is and what a small world it is at the same time. So don't forget to do that. So thank you for joining me today. And for me, it's midnight, but for you, it might be afternoon. It might be, you might be on your way to work or home from work or what have you. So I'm really super glad you joined us today. Today, what we're going to be talking about is the importance of establishing a vocabulary building habit. Now, people think, they hear that and they think, oh, one more thing I have to do, one more thing I have to, cram into my head. But it doesn't have to be like that. So I'm here to not only tell you why it's so important, areas, um, reasons that you may not have thought of as to why your vocabulary is so important, but also to give you a few tips on how to make that easier to add to your, to add to your routine without it taking away from your your life and adding a burden. It's not supposed to be a burden. Adding vocabulary is actually not, I don't like to say ammunition, but the way I like to think of vocabulary, and I've said this before, but I like to think of vocabulary as a bank. You make deposits of vocabulary into your vocabulary account. And not only does that account obviously increase in value, you build up more wealth in the words that you put in there, but also when you make withdrawals from this vocabulary bank, your balance never diminishes. The more you use the words, the more you access the words, the more value they bring you, and the more wealth you receive from them. So just because you're taking a word out to use it doesn't mean it's never there for you to use again. The wonderful thing about a vocabulary bank is that money, that wealth is always there, whether you use it or you don't. Of course, the more you use it, the more wealth it produces for you. So if you think of it that way, it can be really helpful. So often what I like to have my vocabulary notebook, but sometimes that can be tedious. I have again, I'm learning Korean, and so I have my vocabulary here. I've got the word in Korean, and then I have the definition, and I have some notes in here on what it might mean. Sorry. But as you can see, sometimes you just kind of quit. You give up on it because it can be tedious to do it this way. And it can be cumbersome sometimes. And I'm the kind of person who has notes in all different places. And so sometimes gathering them all together, again, you're writing it and writing it and writing it, and you think, oh my goodness, I'm done. I'm so tired of writing these words. So another way that I do this, and actually a fun way that I'm realizing now, but another way that I do this is I have an online flashcard application, which I want to figure it out a little bit more before I mention it. I know other folks have mentioned it, but I want to find a way that works a little bit better without the stress of daily. You have to make your quota every day. So I want to figure that out first, but I do that, and it is very helpful. The value of writing it down is that your brain, the physical act of writing the word, connects it to your brain. It connects the definition to the word, and there is a physical thing that happens to help you remember it better and longer. But again, it can be tedious. So one thing that I like to do is I like to create my own flashcards. Whoops, sorry. Again, this can be tedious, and then making sure you have all your cards in your dictionary, in your journal can again be a bit of a deal. But this is again helpful, and this way you're just seeing the one word. Okay, you've got the one word, and you've got the definition. I think I wrote that in wrong. And it helps you to see your mistakes. I wrote this incorrectly. The consonant should be under the placeholder there. But again, and I do them in whatever color happens to come up. I cut up index cards. And I write them down this way. So these are my alphabet and my sounds. But here we're getting into words. And sometimes I'll have phrases. Trying to see. Yeah. So, and it's good. You can stick these in your pocket if you know that you're going to go wait for someone. Or if you have to, I don't know, watch a baseball game or something. Or wait before a class. You can just do your flashcards there right here. You don't have to take out the whole stack. You can take out some. This is the idea that I just had as we were waiting. I was doing some cleaning yesterday in the basement, and I found this giant ceramic piggy bank. This little bank. It was supposed to be a gift for someone, but that didn't work out. And so it's this giant piggy bank with the cutest little smile, and it has a little crown on it. And so you could take something like that, find something fun like that, cut these up and put them in your bank. And there's your vocabulary bank. You'd obviously have to find a way to easily get them out, but it's just a way to, really drive home the idea that this new word is a source of wealth for you. And it's, again, because it's a little bit more interesting than just writing it in your vocabulary journal. It sticks in your head a little bit more. And again, because you have to write the word out, and then you have to write the definition. Did I write? Oh, I see this. I started to, when I first did them, I had the word, and I think there were some pronunciation things, but then I had the definition really big on the back. But then I learned, okay, well, I was relying too much on this, and sometimes it would bleed through so I could see it. So now I have my word, but I have my definition really tiny on the bottom. But they're just different ways that you can connect the word into your brain. And so there's one little tip for you. If you have your own ways of making, doing vocabulary in a non-standard way, put it in the comments if you feel like sharing, because the more we can help each other out, the more we can share, the better off we'll all be, and the sooner we can all communicate together. So, sorry. If you've seen my morning meetings, you'll see that my hair does not like to do anything that I ask it to do. So I always have a bad hair day. But anyway, so that's the main reason that you really want to establish your vocabulary bank here is that the more words you have readily available that you can recall and that you can use easily and correctly and clearly, then the better you can communicate with the people around you. And that's what learning a language is all about. It's all about learning to communicate effectively with another person who has learned a different system for communicating. So you're opening up your world, and you're just not only you're opening up your world, but you're also introducing into your world a new way of expressing yourself, a new way of getting in touch with yourself, understanding who you are, etc. Again, I've said this many times before. One language has a particular way of expressing things. Their culture has a particular viewpoint. They see things a certain way. Their understanding of life and how things work in the world comes from one point of view. But you have a group of people over here who sees the same thing from a different viewpoint. And so now not only are you, and also they have different words for those, different words to express the way they see things. And so by learning this new way of seeing things and expressing things, you're now adding that way to communicate into what you already have, into your viewpoint. So you're making your understanding of the world that much bigger, that much more expansive, and you're giving yourself that many more tools, if that's the correct way to say it. Not that much more tools, that many more tools, with which to express yourself. And so to me, that's the biggest reason for establishing a vocabulary habit. Now, again, that the way you gather your vocabulary, increase your vocabulary, store your vocabulary is going to be different from person to person. These are just some ways that I've found that work for me. And again, I don't use each of them all the time. Sometimes I need to do it this way. The thing I'm finding with this way is that I can't organize it like I would like to. But it's a fabulous way. When I'm studying, I leave my book out. I have my notebooks over here, and I have my vocabulary book over here. And as I come upon a new word or a new phrase, I take my notes, but I write that in my book. And so I know that when I'm studying, this is the most effective way to do it. Whereas if I'm just looking to quickly review, this is a better way to do it. The flashcards are a better way to do it. And sometimes I don't have I don't want to lug all that stuff around. So the app is a better way to do it on my phone. And you can find different apps that suit your needs. I just found one for Korean that it's a little bit of a game, but it just gives your brain a different way to see the words and connect the words with the definition. So it connects your brain in a different way, which helps you remember it better. And I'm seeing that by using this particular app. I'm actually learning a language point that I kept getting stuck on. I could not, no matter how many times I saw these words, I could not understand and connect them with the definition. Or if I saw the definition, I could not recall the word. I was getting to the point where I would look at it and say like, "Oh, I think that has to do with this thing," but I couldn't remember it. Well, this little way on the app is helping me to remember that. So there's so many different ways to use that. I recommend you find the ones that work for you in the combination that works best for you. Um, but again, the more words you have at your disposal, the more clearly and effectively you can communicate. And also, the vocabulary um, doesn't stop at the words. Learn the vocabulary of the situation, or the vocabulary that expressions have, or intonation, or the inflection. That is part of the vocabulary. Where you put the emphasis on the word is part of the vocabulary. So it's not only knowing the word by sight and how to and what it means, but it's also how you say it, because it's especially in English. I'm sure this is the case with other languages, but in English, if you highlight a certain or put the emphasis on one part of the word versus another part of the word, you're actually saying a different word. So it might be spelled the same way, but you're saying a different word. So that's part of the vocabulary too. All right. So all right. So that's one thing. That's one area. The second the second reason that you want to that's beneficial to establish a vocabulary habit is that if you approach it from, say, building your vocabulary based on a particular topic, then you have that whole vocabulary at your disposal for when that topic comes around. So say you don't like to mix and mingle, you're afraid to talk to people about things. Well, if you have vocabulary stored up in your bank ready for withdrawal, then and that topic comes up, then you'll be comfortable and you'll feel confident that you have the vocabulary to talk about it. So you don't have to be afraid to talk to people, because you won't be able to communicate with them. By building your vocabulary based on a certain topic or area of discussion, then you have that confidence behind you to help you step out and join in, and to not be afraid of speaking in front of people. Um, and that's a huge help, I find, with my students, because so many of them tell me that, part of the reason they're afraid to speak, beyond being embarrassed about saying it incorrectly, beyond having people think that they're stupid because they can't pronounce it correctly, is the fact that they don't have the words, and then they don't know how to take what's in their head and put it out there in a intelligent way, because they don't have their vocabulary built up yet. So that will help alleviate a lot of that fear of speaking to native English speakers, okay? And it will make you more interesting, quite frankly. Nobody wants to get stuck with the person who has nothing to say, right? And you don't want to be that person that nobody wants to get stuck with because you have nothing to say. This gives you something you can always talk about, and you can be versatile in group situations, okay? So, and then the third thing I wanted to talk about is that um, by having daily contact with words, that um, keeps your it keeps your studies active and fresh and interesting. So again, you don't have to sit there and study the dictionary. I was just going to grab it, but you don't have to sit there and study. Oh my goodness, I have to remember a, at, and aardvark. You don't have to go through and try to remember it all. You can just by simply, um, listening to music in English and reading along the lyrics, that's exposure to words. You're still increasing your vocabulary and you're solidifying what you already know because you're listening to it and you're recognizing certain words and you're reading along with it and you're recognizing certain words or you're hearing how it's pronounced. And so that helps you. And, by reading, there's so many things you can be reading, which I'll get into in a second. But, reading things every day gives you the exposure to the grammar. It gives you the exposure to how to be creative with the vocabulary that you're learning. And it gives you an well exposure to and an understanding of different periods in history and in the development of the English language. And what I mean by that is when I was starting to get into my love of the English language and the written word, and then sometimes I would read it out loud and I would hear the rhythm of the words and they just became so beautiful to me, was because I started reading novels, popular novels from the 1800s, the 1920s, I just go to yard sales or the library has book sales, or my library has book sales, so I'm sure most of them do, to raise money. And, for $1, I could pick up an old book that they were going to get rid of, that would expose me to the language of a certain period, so the language of the 1900s or, the 1906 or the language of 1925 or 1945. So it gives me a feeling for, it gives you insight into how people thought and how they were, how they behaved, how they interacted by the language that they used. And you can see by reading books from different time frames, you can see how the society developed. You can see what was important to the culture in general throughout certain time frames, and you can piece things together. So it's like an historic, not an archaeological dig, but it's a um, there is a word. There's a social archaeology, or I forgot the terminology, but there is a type of a societal archaeology kind of a thing. I think I'm pretty sure it's social archaeology. Somebody, if you know it, correct me, please. Um, so, and that again, it exposes you to different ways of presenting your ideas. You don't have, just because you live, this is being recorded in 2023, but that doesn't mean that I can't use phrases and expressions from 1925, from 1876, or any of those other things. I can choose the words, choose the phrases, choose the communication style that fits me best and fits the message best. So by expanding your vocabulary way beyond what you might think it means, completely opens up so many ways for you to communicate. And again, that's what learning a language is all about, is learning to communicate in a new way with a new set of people. So I just want to make sure. Okay, so some of the things that you can be reading or doing that will give you exposure to words every day, that your brain is registering them. And at some point, when you go to actively work on that particular word or those phrases or that situation, you'll be withdrawing those from your word bank without realizing that you were depositing into your word bank. So some of the ways, definitely, read books of all kinds. A lot of times I like to read children's books for the language that I'm studying, because this, obviously at the beginning, because it helps you. It's geared for people who are just learning the language, even though they're native speakers. Children are learning all of the mechanics and the mechanisms of their own language. So it's a great place to start. But if you're at a higher level, read books at a higher level and try to challenge yourself to read books just one level higher or two levels higher than where you're at. Because if you set the bar high, this is one phrase, one quote I heard when many years back when I was first teaching, that your students live up to the lowest bar that you set for them. So set the bar high. Well, do that for yourself, set the bar high. And that expression comes from the sport high jumping, where you raise the bar and you have to jump over it, and um, obviously the challenge is who can jump over the highest bar. So for yourself, for your language learning, set that bar higher than you think you're at. The worst thing that happens is you knock the bar off. You don't make it over the bar. So you set it down a little more. You set it down a notch and learn to jump over that and then set it higher. So the world isn't going to end if you don't make it over that hurdle the first time, the second time. You adjust it until you can make it over, and then you set it higher and you whatever. But don't always set it on the lowest setting, because then you'll never progress anywhere. Okay. But some other things is, again, I like to keep this to half an hour because I'm trying to do this so you can um, sneak this in a slot where it's not going to take away from your everyday life, but you can still get some learning, get some new insight. So one thing I definitely recommend is, especially if you're having trouble with your emails or understanding things that are going on, or you want to learn to write better emails, read your emails at work. The emails that you're sending every day. Look at the ones that you admire, that made a lot of sense, that communicated the message clearly. Read those, and then read your emails and see, okay, how could I have fixed that? How could I fix mine to make it as effective as this other one? So that's definitely a huge help for you in the office and in your business environment. And I do recommend reading them aloud, because you can hear how everything sounds, and you can hear how you sound, and you can say, oh, I'd like to be clearer in my speech or in the way I'm presenting it. It really helps you out significantly. I'm just looking at my notes here. So there's books, there's magazines, there's newspapers, and if you go online, you can find readings that are graded for certain levels of fluency. So, and I think they're called graded readings, GRADED. Um, so you can find readings that are geared for your level, and you can also find some that are for a little higher, so you can set the bar higher for yourself. Another thing that people often overlook is comic books and graphic novels, and like I said, children's books. People, especially adults, have such a hard time um, regressing, or they think that they're regressing when they read things made for children. But graphic novels aren't made for children. It's just a different way of seeing the story. You know, there's a whole visual element to reading the story and telling the story that is super helpful when you're learning vocabulary. And again, it keeps it fresh, it keeps it, exciting, and it just changes things up for you, and it activates different muscles in your brain that help you remember better. And then, yeah, and oh, so I did mention that about make sure that you look at your sources from different years, different eras, different, historical periods, so that you get a much more well-rounded vision of the society. Even I like to, the United States of America, there are so many different, because it's such a huge area, there are so many different cultural influences in different parts of the country. And because there were different environmental, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Different environmental circumstances, I suppose, that caused those different communities to develop their own habits, their own way of doing things, their own vision of life, and etc. Reading from different areas of the country as well is super helpful, because you get to understand, so why are people in the Northeast so stressed out and seemingly rude versus people down south who seem so much more relaxed and more accommodating or friendly, and why are the people in the Midwest so polite and wonderful, and California is so laid back, and Texas is this, and the Northeast, Montana, um, Oregon, why do those people act the way they do, etc. Super helpful in understanding not only the individual pockets of the culture, but how, what are the similarities that therefore make up a general society, a general culture. So I think that's all that I really wanted to make sure that you understood. Yeah, that's everything. So the one thing before we go, I have a challenge for you. I want you to take this week and learn 10 new words. So you can learn however you want. You can do what I call a dictionary safari, and I just open it up. The first word I look at, I start learning that, and then I look at the different synonyms and antonyms that are associated with that word, and I look those up. So you can just by looking up one word, you can get your 10 words just by connecting all of those dots. Or you can, do the first 10 words in the dictionary. You could do 10 words that you heard in conversation that you weren't quite sure in your reading, 10 words. It doesn't matter. By the end of the week, you can gauge your time, 2 words a day. You can do it all at once. The point here, though, I don't suggest doing it all at once unless it's the only time you have, and that could still be developing your habit. But I suggest it's more effective for you if you do, 2 words a day or a few words a day to come to the 10 at the end of the week. Just again, to get you in that daily habit of expanding your vocabulary so that you see that it doesn't have to take a lot of time, and you can be learning without, putting in a huge effort. So again, just, writing down a word or two that you heard each day and then looking that up and learning that is, how easy is that? Everybody can find the time to write down a word or two that kind of triggered their interest. Okay. So that's my challenge to you. And then what I want you to do is, you can write them all if you want in the comments, but definitely write down your favorite word that you learned this week. And just write down why. Why is that your favorite word? Is it because you love the way it sounds? Is it fun to pronounce? Does it have a meaning that surprised you? Whatever that reason is for why that's your favorite word, put it down in the comments, okay? So, all right, I'm going to cut this off now. And if you want these to go longer, let me know, because anyone who's been seeing me for a smidgen of time knows that I can talk about this for as long as you want me to. But again, I'm trying to be considerate for you. So, all right, we will cut this off here. And remember, I'm going live again at noon Eastern time. So 12 o'clock in the afternoon Eastern time. So if you want to come back, and if you thought of a question and you want to come back, join me at noon. Again, that's Eastern time. And again, because they're live, they're not all the same. So each live stream is different, and there's different bits of information in each one. So it never hurts to see them both. So, all right, super glad you could join me today. And I hope you have a great week, and hope to see you in a few hours. All right, you have a great day. Bye-bye.